Excuse my tripod here.
Try not to trip over your headphones.
I hear you, buddy. I wish I had something right about that.
Hey, could you bring them out to something? Sure.
You do have access right here on set.
It's live.
Because I didn't for a while after we did that changeover, the technology.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, we're good.
No, that wouldn't have happened one time. I'd need to tap out outside.
I got it plugged in for you.
Oh, that's bright. You feel like I'm being interrogated. I'll tell you everything that you want to know. Hi, I'm Brad Worthen, and welcome to the Noon Debrief. You won't have to listen to my raspy voice for about half a minute. As I think almost all of you know, because I've seen a lot of familiar faces, this is a program of the South Carolina Confederate Relic Room and Military Museum. We can't use our usual room over there right now, and so we love being here because the library's been so good to us, and this is like, what, 2 or 3 times as good as what we got over there anyway. So, anyway, today's speaker is from the Relic Room, the Curator of History and Archives, Ben Battiste. And he's going to talk about the history of that thing right there. Well, what that is a dummy of. And but it's authentic weight, right?
Yep, authentic weight.
Yeah. Anyway, he's a very qualified speaker on the subject. He has carried an M4, which is the shorter and lighter version of that, in Iraq and Afghanistan, serving with the 82nd Airborne and the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. He entrusted his life to the M4 over there. And he came back over here, and he was a marksmanship instructor at Fort Jackson, working both with the M16 and the M4 with the Army recruits. After Ben speaks, we started this new program. I have free passes for anybody who would like to go over to the museum afterwards and see our Vietnam exhibit or any part of it. But Joe Long, the Curator of Education, is going to conduct that, and he'll be looking to start about 1:30. And so it's not hard to get over there by then. And just come up to me afterwards if you want one. You can actually use these on another date if you want to, but you don't want to miss the tour because they're always good. All right, well, I want you to help me welcome Ben.
Thank you very much. You guys hear me in the back all right? Okay. As long as I'm being heard in the back, I'd rather not deal with the microphone. Well, Brad already introduced me, so it took a little bit of my talk. Go ahead. We're breaking things. So he already took a little bit of my thunder with the introduction, great introduction. But yeah, my name's Ben Battiste. Work over at the Confederate Relic Room, where I'm the Curator of History and Archivist. And before that, did 22 years in the U.S. Army and retired as a rifle marksmanship instructor. So that's where I'm coming from. So I have been working with platforms very similar to this for quite some time. What we're going to be talking about today is the how and why of the AR-15 platform, the M16. We're going to talk a little bit about why we moved over to this platform, what this platform's good at, as well as how this platform has moved into the future and has continued to be used in the 21st century as a modern tool for engagement. All right, so sure this is recognizable to more than a few of you here, the M14, which was the predecessor to the M16. So this was developed in the late 1950s, and coming from the M1, this was supposed to be the do-it-all rifle to see the military forward in time. So before this, we had, if you needed to have long-range engagements against an enemy, you had the M1 with its 8-round capacity. If you needed something that fired a little faster and gave you that suppressive fire, you had things like the M3 grease gun or the bar. So this, like I said, is supposed to be the jack of all trades, and it was chambered to use the 7.62 by 51 NATO round, which is known for being a very high-powered round. And this gave this weapon tremendous range, which if we were fighting a war in the plains, on the plains of Europe, that would be fantastic. You could use this to hit people 800 meters out on a point target, no problem. But that round had some issues with it. So this being the jack of all trades, it had that automatic fire. With a 20 round capacity, that's not a lot of ammo to push down range at a single time. And because of the power of that round, that 7.62 round, this thing bucked terribly. It would pull when you would pull that trigger, and you were not going to be hitting targets at automatic. When it comes to military tactics, suppressive fire is not known to be accurate fire, but if it's totally inaccurate, it's not suppressive fire anymore. So it's just making noise. Also, this is a very large and hard to carry weapon. The 14 weighs in at 10 pounds without its ammunition, so it weighs a soldier down. With the ammo, you're looking at an extra heavy load, and with the length of the weapon, it's something that's going to catch on things. So as we move into the Vietnam theater, we're finding out that while this is a very high-powered weapon, we can't use it to its strengths. It catches on trees, bramble, vines, just because of its size. When we're working in very hot, muggy environments, that extra weight really quickly adds up on a soldier and really starts draining them. And the extended range and the power of that 7.62 round can't be realized because what we're finding out is we're engaging at very short ranges in the jungle. There's a lot of ambushes, there's not these long sight lines that you can get, so having something that hits really far away at high power isn't as advantageous as it used to be in prior wars. So with these things in mind, it was one of those, let's go back to the drawing table and see what else we can do. The other thing that kind of woke us up to that was we were dealing with fighting against the AK-47. So we've got the Soviet weapons, Chinese weapons that are being imported over into Vietnam, and we're fighting against those. So this is a weapon that's known for being very reliable, very rugged. It does great in the humidity. Instead of using a gas impingement system to blow back the bolt, which if you don't know what that means, it's when the gas that blows the bolt back to rechamber the next round. This has a piston that attaches to the bolt and pushes the bolt backwards. These systems aren't as accurate as an impingement system, but they fire a lot cleaner, they don't gum up as much. So it's one of those trade-off things, and that was a trade-off that the AK-47 made. So this used the 7.62 round as well, but instead of using the heavier powdered round that we had with the M14, this uses a 7.62 by 39 millimeter round. So it doesn't have the range or the power of the M14, but that's not really hampering this weapon when it is being used in the jungles of Vietnam. The other thing that gave this some advantage is this 30-round magazine, and without having that much power behind it, it was a lot more controllable when you went into full auto with it. So this could actually suppress American forces, where American forces were having trouble suppressing with their wild kicking M14s. So with those, with the trade-offs of the M14 being questioned now, we started to look at, well, what can we have that's really, what can we do that will be something comparable to the AK-47 and can be an answer to the AK-47 over in the theater of Vietnam. And that developed into us adopting the AR-15. So the AR-15 was designed by Armalite, Eugene Stoner. It was his weapon. And this was also being developed and fielded starting in the late 1950s. So what Stoner was looking to do when he was developing the AR-15 was to make something that was smaller, lightweight, using aluminum and composite materials, and in designing it, he was chambering it to a much smaller round. And this round, instead of being that 7.62 that we've been talking about, is looking at going into a 5.56 by 45 cartridge. So he comes up with this, but not a lot of people in the Army want to adopt this weapon when it first hits the radars of the Department of Defense. There is a strong holdout for the M14 because, well, the M14's also been developed rather recently, and I'm sure that you guys could all guess how the military feels about something that has more stocking power and is bigger and stronger and more robust. That's what the Department of Defense likes to hear. So why would you go to a lower powered weapon when we have this higher powered weapon? Well, maybe our soldiers just need to get better with the higher powered weapon. So there was some skepticism about this weapon and how it was going to be used. But even with that, some people in the Air Force, it was, let's see here in my notes, General Curtis LeMay decided to adopt this weapon and bring it into the Air Force as a base security weapon. So he saw that going to a 5.56 and a lighter weapon, well, maybe that's not exactly the best choice for the field. It was going to be a good choice for base security, where you don't have to be looking at longer ranges, and having something lighter weight is going to be something easier for your guards to deal with. Come on in. So, they adopt this, and slowly the AR-15, which then gets renamed as it's adopted to the M16, starts getting fielded by special forces and starts seeing limited use inside Vietnam. And the initial reports that are coming from the use in Vietnam are really promising. The weapon is lighter. It doesn't catch on things. Soldiers enjoy carrying this weapon a lot more because of its lower weight. And they also wanted to talk about its reliability and the fact that you can fire this thing fully automatic and it stays on target, which was something that the 14 just couldn't do. And it was with those recommendations that started seeing more and more adoption over in Vietnam. And eventually the Department of Defense decided, well, I mean, everything seems to be going well with the M16. Let's fully adopt this and issue it out to the soldiers. So they issued the M16. And it was a rocky rollout when it went to all the soldiers over there in Vietnam. So the military likes to spend money, but not on the little things. We like to spend money on the big things. So little things like the preventative maintenance manuals, teaching people how to actually use the weapon, cleaning kits. These are all things we wanted to skip on because it's a new weapon. That's exciting. Those little things aren't as exciting. Other things that we decided to save a little bit of money on is that the NATO round that we're talking about, the 5.56 by 45 cartridge, the one that was developed for use with the AR-15 platform uses a longer cylindrical powder inside of it, which burns cleaner, also more expensive to make. So the Department of Defense, in their infinite wisdom, said, let's save some money. We'll put a standard brown powder in there. Burns a little dirty, but that'll be fine. It was not fine. And it led to some very bad reports coming from the field when this weapon was being issued out to masses of troops. So they don't have cleaning kits. Nobody's been taught how to maintenance this weapon. And let me tell you, maintenance on an M16 doesn't come naturally to anybody. It was like maybe week 3 in basic training, and they opened up the arms room for us and issued us all our M16A2s. And we then got trained on how to disassemble it into its different components, how to clean each piece. And after we cleaned it and spent hours scrubbing with our toothbrushes and our glass brushes and oiling everything down, we'd reassemble it, we'd do a functions check, and then the drill sergeant would come and inspect. And they would still find dirt everywhere. They would white glove that, and it would be dirty, and then your day just got a lot longer at that point. So eventually we all figured it out, and once you figure it out and you maintain this weapon, it's a great weapon, but it's learning that level of maintenance, and that's not something that you can just throw people in the field in the heat of battle and say, figure it out. There was also weird stories that were going along with the M16 it was issued. There were units who were handing them out, telling the service members that, hey, these things are self-cleaning. No, this is not a self-cleaning weapon. It is a finicky weapon. Unlike the AK-47, you can run that thing over with a truck and it'll still fire. This having the direct gas impingement, and that system right there requires a certain amount of cleanliness just to get the bolt to operate. So we had that inadequate training and maintenance from the troops. And other things that we were having problems with was just the way, because things were dirty over there and it wasn't really being expected, was the magazine was a problem and a failure point of the weapon. So the springs in here, once they got a little bit dirty, and this part right here in a magazine, once that gets some dirt on it, doesn't want to slide through as well, and so you don't get proper freeze. And the original magazine, which we'll get into in a minute here, were made out of aluminum. The idea was it was disposable, but they weren't disposable. It was like, as I already stated, the military doesn't like to spend money on things it doesn't have to spend money on. So make it work. Just reuse what you've got. Do more with less. These have been the prides of the military back then, today, and will be into the future. And so we were talking about the weather and the dirt. Another thing that the original weapons had that was a problem is the chamber. A lot of this was aluminum and composite. Aluminum's not going to handle chambering around and the pressures that you get from firing around. So it had a steel barrel steel chamber. And that steel was left raw in the original M16s. So those original M16s, I'm sure anybody who's ever dealt with iron or steel in a wet environment corrodes really, really fast. So everything was working against this thing having a smooth operation. And it wasn't until we went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out ways to get past the operation issues that this doesn't actually become a very serviceable weapon. So the refinements. So the first refinement moved this from the M16 to the M16A1. And the biggest refinement that you will see on these that's noticeable is the forward assist. So as we were talking about with the rounds coming in from the magazine, don't always feed smoothly. And sometimes what happens is the buffer spring that goes back into the stock just does not have enough pressure to push the round all the way forward. So they added a manual assist that you could tap, and it would push the round fully into the chamber, providing that seal that you would need to fire your weapon. So it also added chroming to the barrel and to the chamber. Once those were chromed, that gave a protective layer between the air and the steel, so it wasn't so rust prone anymore. Still requires lots of cleaning to make sure that there's no carbon buildup, but it wasn't going to rust out and prevent proper functioning of the weapon. The weapon continued to develop into the M16A2, which the M16A1 was a select fire between safe, single round, and full auto. And the big change in the A2 was moving it over to a 3-round burst instead of a full automatic weapon. The idea with that being 3-round burst was enough for a weapon like this to be used against an enemy. As we were talking about with the M14, that was supposed to be the jack of all trades and be able to provide suppressive fire. Suppressive fire is that idea of you're just putting down so much lead downrange at your enemy that they are scared to poke their head up. That's not supposed to be the effective fire. The effective fire comes from your riflemen, who are going to move to a flank and aim at their target from a flank, and hopefully, with accurate fire, be able to take out the enemy quickly while they still have that element of surprise. So accuracy is what counts. Now, there are times where you have to rely on your rifle to give you that suppressive fire. But suppressive fire at full auto, even if you have a 30-round magazine, burns through a magazine fairly quickly. So instead of going up and pulling the trigger and going pop, 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 you'd get 3 rounds, pop, 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 which can still give you some suppression, but it also increases accuracy while also conserving ammo. So that was the big change with the A2. It also had an improved sighting system with the iron sights on it and gave it a heavier barrel, because all of these weapons, they're consumable items. The more you use them, the more they wear out. And eventually, the gas tube in the barrel is going to get used up, and you're not going to be able to continually repair that weapon anymore. So the A2 went to a heavier setup to give it a longer life in the field. So we've got the M16A3 next, which the A3 is when it started moving to where it added the dovetail flat setup on the top and on the sides to add additional equipment to. And then the big change between those is the A3 going back to a full auto, and then the 4 going into a burst. And with those having, this modern markings of M4s and having that ability to add things to them, it has allowed this M16 platform to continue to see service to this day in a limited situational basis, depending on the needs of the mission. Okay. All right, so that's the M16. The M4 is what grows out of this weapon, or I should say shrinks out of this weapon. Because just as we saw with the M16 being a smaller, more compact version of the 14, as we move into more modern warfare, the emphasis has gone away from just being able to do patrols in the jungle to now it's patrols in urban environments. And also the military has progressed. A lot more troops have become mounted in vehicles. Now we have always had carbines associated with people who are like tankers and such, anybody who is working in heavy machinery, heavy equipment, heavy vehicles, because it's just too hard to bring a full-size rifle up and engage stuff when you're in these close quarters. And as everybody else moved into this kind of a position where they were going to see more time inside of vehicles, a smaller carbine was seen as necessary as a standard issued weapon to the entire service. So the M4 has its shorter barrel, which goes down to a 14-inch barrel, and it has a collapsible stock. Ideal for urban contact, as we were saying. And it also has a lot of the same parts and compatibilities with the M16. So, like we said, the military doesn't like spending money where it doesn't have to, and doesn't like spending money on the small stuff. So when you've already got an entire backlog of parts for the M16, it really helps save money and time when the receiver's still using all of the same parts that you've already got in your inventory. So this is a weapon that by making it smaller and reworking how the gas comes back in the impingement system, is it as capable as the M16? Not quite. It has the same trade-offs that we saw between the M16 and the M14. M16 is going to outrange the M4. At point targets, when you're trying to hit a single person out in the field, it's not that big of a difference. It's looking at the M4 is a 500-meter point, where this is a 550-meter point. But area, that's only got about 600-meter range to hit area targets. So being able to suppress a fire, where this can reach out to about 800 meters. So that's just based on the length of the barrel. So the longer barrel is going to give you that increased accuracy, which the M4 just doesn't have. But, as we already discussed with the 14, depending on the engagement and the distances you're looking at, that longer range isn't always necessary. But a fun side note to that is, as we moved into Afghanistan and the wars there, all of a sudden we found we were firing from mountaintop to mountaintop. And the M4's range all of a sudden became a hindrance. So we could go back and develop a new weapon, and we're always trying to develop new weapons. But we already had something in the arsenal that fit the bill for something that could reach out and hit targets at long range. The M14 came right back into the military inventories and was issued to usually one member per squad that would then have the 14 that they would carry with them, just so they could do the long-range shooting that became important in those kind of missions.
Hey, Glenn, I got a quick question.
Yes.
What was the time frame of the M4? When was that?
The M4 really started seeing mainstream use in the military right around the turn of the 21st century. So right around 2000, it started seeing more and more mainstream use. Before that, it had seen limited use through the late 90s. And it was one of those weapons that was seen in use more. All these weapons start where you see them being used with units like the Special Forces, the Rangers, and then it moves on to more general use. All right, so we've been talking a little bit about how the gas system works, and I'd like to take a minute to sort of explain that here. So one thing with the M16 and all of the stuff that works on this platform is it's a weapon that fires from the closed bolt. And by the closed bolt, what we mean is this right here is the bolt. You've got your round chamber right there in the chamber. And that is what had to be chromed, is right there and then down the barrel. And this is fully forward and seated when it fires. You've got your firing pin right there. You've got your trigger mechanism that's going to come up, hit the firing pin, send the firing pin forward, send the bullet on its trajectory. So this was developed to fire in a closed bolt system, and most rifles are going to be developed this way because a closed bolt system is a more accurate system than an open bolt system. And these are weapons that have been built for accuracy. So by firing from the closed bolt, there's no way when it is ready to fire for dirt and foreign particulates or whatever to get into your chamber and gum things up. And also, there's no moving parts other than this coming forward when you actually fire the weapon. By limiting the moving parts, it increases the accuracy of the weapon. And with that added accuracy, you can actually make use of better scopes, better optics, better sights, because it is a more accurate weapon. Now, we do have weapons in our inventory that fire from the open bolt, and that would be more of our machine guns, and as you go back, it would be the grease guns and everything. That is a faster system of firing. So those fire when it takes the round and comes back here to fire, and then it sends the round forward. But there's more moving parts, because when you pull the trigger, the entire bolt has to move forward. Loses accuracy. Having a better scope doesn't make as much sense at that point, but it allows better cooling of the weapon and allows better speed. And the impingement system, going back to this slide, this has a pretty good view. That has a good view of it. I'll leave the pointer right here. So when the round fires, the gas is released here, and it's going to travel through the barrel as it pushes the bullet on its way. And as it finishes pushing the bullet, some of that gas is going to escape up the front end, which is going to be right about here on this weapon, and it's going to start moving back into the weapon through the gas. And by being direct impingement, there is nothing but the gas moving through here and coming in, and the bolt seats right here. And so it's going to collect that gas into the bolt, and as it pressurizes, it's going to shoot the bolt backwards into the weapon. So the bolt will then move backwards into the weapon, cocking the weapon, and we'll have the buffer spring in here, which is going to then compress as the bolt moves into this area, and then the spring will push it back to where it goes. Okay. So, magazines, and the development of magazines. So, the early M16s were using a 20-round pressed aluminum magazine, which kind of defeats the purpose of looking for higher rounds, but for some reason we decided 20 was the way to go. Now,
Wasn't the M14 a 20 round?
The M14 was a 20 round. But part of why we had to get away from the 14 was we needed more rounds.
Yeah.
And then we went to another 20 round. But there were some strengths to that first 20 round magazine because it's straight. So when you have a curved magazine like this, the problem with it is as it feeds in rounds, a friction point is going to be right here as it bends around. So with a straight 20, there's no friction point. They flow pretty easily. The problem with these pressed 20s is once they got a dent or something in them, when you pressed aluminum, you then have a little piece denting into your spring, and all of a sudden your drive spring starts catching. And it means you don't have a reliable feed into your weapon. So because of that, and because of the need for more ammo, we moved over to the 30-round magazine, the curved magazine. So they changed the way the spring works for this, and eventually changed the followers. And this is a more modern type follower right here. And one of the big changes in magazine technology was by, instead of just having one back follower that would push against the back side of this as it comes up, just added a second follower to it. And by having that thicker follower, it ensures that there's even pressure as it moves all the way up. So that has increased the reliability. These kind of magazines that have a tan follower that are issued by the military in modern day have about a 50% better chance of not failing than the older style green ones that we were using before that, which were an improvement because of the spring technology being better than the black ones that were used during the Vietnam era. So that is something that has continued to develop and improve as time has moved on. So as we continue into the future, are we going to continue using this AR-15 platform? Maybe. We are looking at moving to, this is an oscillating thing in the military. 5.56 doesn't have the stopping power of the 7.62 round. But everybody knows 7.62 has its problems too when you're putting it into the hands of a rifleman. So the modern military is looking at a brand new round, which is the 6.8 millimeter round. Now this round is not really in the NATO inventory, so that's a mark against it, but all the tests are showing so far that the new weapons are going to outperform the AR-15 basis chassis that we've been working with. But in the meantime, we are continuing forward with this platform. And the M4 has different models that we've developed based on the mission. The M4A1 having an improved barrel over the original M4 and going to a full auto. And that was something that just recently started getting pushed out to service members all across the different services. All of the M4s, and we saw that older M4 back here, this is the original heat shield and handguard that were on the M4s. But depending on what unit you were with, you would have seen the dovetail rail systems on your weapons. And that's been the other big improvement that you see on modernized M4s. We've gone to full auto with them for the same reason that full auto has been seen as a benefit on the M16, but you can still get them in the 3-round burst category depending on what your mission is. But yeah, the biggest thing is these rails. Having a flat set of rails up here and having your 4 sets of rails here, you can add such items onto it as, right here we have an ACOG sight and a PEC-2 laser, Surefire flashlight. I don't know if the G-Money pistol grip in the front's worth putting on there. Lots of people like putting them on there. Never been a fan of it. But all of these different railing systems that we put on it all add to the modularity of the M4 and keep the AR-15 platform as technically relevant in today's warfighting field. So, the AR-15 M16 platform has had over 60 years of service now at this point. And it is a weapon that you can find derivatives of all around the world. The only weapon you might find more of on the field is the AK-47 style weapons. It's, as we've already talked about, this is a lightweight weapon, and as it has developed through history, it has done nothing but get more and more lightweight, and easier to carry, easier to wield, while also adding a modularity to it that allows it to be a very technical, very advanced weapon system. And with that, it is something that has continued to evolve and be something that keeps the modern warfighter equipped as best as anybody can hope to be equipped in the field. So with that being said, I'm open to any kind of questions. If you want to share your experiences with these weapon platforms, I know we have some veterans here in the audience today who maybe were there for the changeover between the 14 and the 16, or if you're closer to my age, maybe you were there for the changeover from the 16 into the M4. But yeah, if anybody has any experiences, any comments, or anything they'd like to share or ask. Yes, sir.
I apologize for missing the first part of your presentation. I couldn't go over the location, but was the M16's reputation for unreliability and attributable to any particular factor? Again, I apologize for missing the first part of what you said.
There was quite a few factors that led to the unreliability of the early M16s that were being seen over there. A lot of it had to do with the soldiers weren't being properly trained in how to clean the weapon. Some of them even being taught that the weapon was a self-cleaning weapon, and they didn't have to worry about that, which younged them up really fast. And there was a lack of cleanliness being handed to soldiers. Without knowing how to clean and not expecting to clean, they were not great weapons. And the other big thing that was fixed when we moved over from the M16 to the M16A1 that helped with the reliability was the chroming of the barrel and the chamber, as well as the adding of a forward assist to make sure that the chamber was closed and the round was seated before firing. Yes, sir.
Would you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah, sure.
Was that belt driven on the rounds?
He's just carrying
Oh, okay.
belt ammunition, so I'm sure that he's just.
He's supporting
he
the saw.
could be an ammo bearer for an M60 or an assistant gunner, or he's just helping out. I was also a 240 Bravo gunner for quite some time, and if anybody in the platoon wanted to help carry some of my ammo, I was all about that. You just carry the ammo for me. It gets heavy fast.
Did it have the capability of launching grenades?
So the grenade launcher is the M203, which comes out of, oh gosh, it's the M72, I think, which is the old style grenade launcher. I got to fire in basic training because one of our drill sergeants had one he acquired magically. And so, yeah, my rifle just didn't have the 203 attached, so they handed me that and I got to fire it. So that was fun. But yeah, the 203 is a 40 millimeter grenade launcher that does attach to the bottom of these. And it gives you a different heat shield when it does that on the M16A1s, and then it's a more incorporated thing on the A2s.
In Vietnam, I flew O2s and I carried a grenade launcher as well as the M16.
And that's actually one of those funny things is they've decided that having the 203 grenade launcher underneath your weapon is too cumbersome and unwieldy, and we have gone back to where the grenadiers and the infantry carry a separate grenade launcher again. So they have a smaller grenade launcher that they will fire grenades with, and then go back to their rifle when they need a rifle. So yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, what's old is new and what's new is old, so we just fall right back into it. Yes, sir. Question.
Could you speak briefly, and you don't have to go into a lot of discussion, but I'm interested in the timeline on barreling versus the twist rate, and whether you're firing a 55 grain bullet or a 62 grain bullet, or it's set up for both.
So the barrels are set up to use various grain, and as I was saying, that there's like a lifespan to all of these based on what you're firing. So if you go into a heavier grain, you're going to reduce the lifespan of your weapon, and that is something that I've had to tell soldiers as a squad leader when they want to like go down the street and pick up some 223 rounds at, say, Walmart, to bring them to, you know, actually do their qualifications and have a few extra rounds just to help them qualify. And it's like, yeah, that's great. Don't fire that ammo. So if you feel you need that, let me know. I will hand you 10 extra rounds and make you feel better.
I could caveat a little bit on
Okay.
his question is, you know, with the M16 series and the A1, fired M193, which was a 55 grain bullet, with a 1 and 12 inch right hand twist, which gave it a muzzle velocity with a 20-inch barrel of about 3,300 feet per second.
Right.
Which was very effective terminal in Vietnam. And the Marine Corps adopted the M16A2 and kind of pushed down the rest of DoD. And they also put a new cartridge with it, the M855 green tip, 62 grain bullet with a 1 and 7 right hand twist at about 3,000 feet per second. And we had it that for a while before we had our first conflict experience with it. It was probably like Somalia. And 3rd Ranger Battalion came back with that cartridge was not very effective. So they actually, you know, Special Operations Command started to develop all different kinds of different rounds that they were using for it because the green tip wasn't working. And then, of course, we go to Afghanistan and Iraq, and we got the M4s and we shortened the barrels to 14 inches. So then you had that same M855. Now we're taking it and we're actually even reducing the velocity of it to like 2,800 feet per second.
Right.
Which, again, you get a lot of reports of guys engaging insurgents, and that bullet terminally was not as it had been advertised. So, you know, the Marine Corps ended up going up with their own bullet design called the SOSAR, which is supposed to be a bullet that can penetrate but has to have thermal effects. And then U.S. Army, we ended up going with after using Mark 262, which is actually a sniper type round, bow-tail owl point,
Right.
with M855A1, which is a crazy effective cartridge. I used to work at FN, and when we shot, I destroyed the range every day shooting them. You know?
So
Very good.
that's actually something I dealt with as a rifle marksmanship, is that move between the 855, the 855A1s, and at Jackson we were trying to get back to at least doing the practice on the ranges with the 855, just because it didn't destroy our targets. Because we were constantly replacing targets when we moved up to the newer ammunition.
Yeah, it's like a much more